Today's lesson is on inverse operations. You probably already know that inverse operations are used to solve equations and inequalities. And so today's lesson is probably just a review for you. Let's go ahead and take a look. You probably also know that a solution to an equation is the value that the variable has to take on in order to make that equation true. And in order to find a solution to an equation, you need to get the variable alone on one side of the equal sign. So in this example, you probably know that this x needs to be alone on the left-hand side of the equal sign. And in order to do that, we have to get rid of this 4 here. And so let's take a look at how we would do that. Inverse operations are a way that we would undo that 4. We would get rid of that 4. Inverse operations are operations that will undo one another. You probably remember that addition and subtraction are inverse operations of each other. So in the example x plus 2 is equal to 10, you would want this x to get by itself. And in order to do that, you would have to get rid of this positive 2. You notice that it's being added, and you remember that to undo addition, you would use subtraction. And so you would subtract 2 from both sides of the equation. And after doing that, you would end up with x is equal to 8. So you used subtraction to get rid of or undo addition in this case. Let's take a look at multiplication and division. You probably also remember that multiplication and division are inverse operations of each other, and so they will undo each other. In this example, 5 times p is equal to 45. You know that the 5 is being multiplied to the p. So to get the p by itself on the left-hand side of the equation, you have to get rid of this 5. And in order to undo that multiplication, you would use division, and you would divide by 5. After doing so, these would cancel to become a 1, or just a p, is what would be left on the left, and that would equal 45 divided by 5 is 9. So we know that p equals 9 is the solution to that equation. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. In this first example, you have x minus 3 is equal to 4. Once again, we know that this x is the variable that we want to get by itself, and we know then that this negative 3 is the number that we must get rid of. Since it's being subtracted, we would use addition as the inverse operation, and we would add 3 to both sides of your equation. Once you do that, you're left with x on the left-hand side, and you would take 4 and add 3 to it, and you know that x is equal to 7. Now another example that we'll look at is the 3/4 times x. 3/4 times x is equal to 9. We know that the 3/4 is being multiplied to the x. We want this x to be by itself, and we know that we have to undo the multiplication that's between them. Now normally we would say to undo multiplication, you use division. And so you would start to divide by that 3/4 so that you can get rid of it. However, if you remember, when you divide fractions, you actually multiply by the reciprocal. So we wouldn't write it like this. We would actually want to multiply this side by the reciprocal 4/3. And again, what we do to one side, we would want to do to the other side. And once we do that, we know that these disappear or become 1, and we're left with just 1x, or x, is equal to, and from here you would take 9 and multiply it by 4/3, or 9 times 4 is 36, and 36 divided by 3 becomes 12. And so the solution to that equation is x is equal to 12. Now there is another way that you can do this same problem. Instead of doing it in one step, you could do it in two different steps. If we take a look at this problem, we can see that we are dividing by a 4. So to undo division, we would multiply by 4 on both sides. They would disappear, leaving us with a 3x is equal to 36. And then we would say the 3 is being multiplied to the x. To undo multiplication, you would divide by 3. And in both cases, you end up with x is equal to 12. Now we're going to take all this information on inverse operations, and you're going to be able to solve more complex equations and equalities. They will be ones that have multi-steps, not just one or two steps.